Budget 2009, brought to you by Deloitte.
We're in lockup, one of the lockup rooms, in fact, that many of us journalists have spent since the early hours of this morning. I'm joined by Pravin Gordhan, the SARS Commissioner. I guess from a tax point of view, it's more about what you didn't do rather than what you did. Plenty of talk in the run-up to this budget that individual taxes might increase, particularly at the higher end of the spectrum. Was that even up for debate in a climate where the consumer is under severe pressure?
Not at all. I think that the Minister of Finance has said many, many years ago that if we are able, with the cooperation of South Africans, to broaden the tax base, then more people will pay less tax. And that's what has happened for the last 7 or 8 years. If we calculate the tax breaks for individuals over the last, say, 8 years or so, it's over 70 billion rands. And this year, it's a total of 13 odd billion rands. And I suppose we've surprised the commentators once again, and it demonstrates the commitment in policy terms to ensuring that particularly lower income people continue to have benefits from the tax system on the one hand, but also looked after in ensuring that fiscal drag is removed.
It does sound like a commitment that might hold for a good couple of years, but are you in a position to be as confident about not moving individual tax rates higher anytime soon?
Well, as the Minister pointed out, we live in a climate of extreme uncertainty. I think everybody's got used to the idea that the uncertain economic climate makes it impossible to look beyond your nose at this point in time. So for now, I think that's the commitment that we're able to keep. It all depends on what kind of revenue flows we get over the next few years and what the fiscal framework looks like at that point in time.
Another talking point into this budget was the need for the corporate landscape, those taxes to become more competitive, that a cut in the corporate rate might be on the card, that it might make a lot of sense, that encouraging foreign investment could make up for some of the shortfall from a drop in the rate and a decline in corporate earnings.
Well, we've brought down corporate rates quite significantly, and at 28%, South Africa is highly competitive in comparison to either middle-income countries around the world or its chief trading partners. There's also the point about the arbitrage opportunity, although that's much better today because of the enforcement efforts that we've actually put in. And this isn't the time for serious tax cuts on the corporate side, when corporate profits will be dropping, when the corporate tax for next year is significantly lower than the last few years as well. And it's something that we need to leave in the pipeline for the future. In addition, remember that there's a lot of tax expenditure going into our tax system. There's all sorts of incentives and industry incentives like the MIDP as well, which costs the fiscus money.
Yeah, and that arbitrage opportunity that Pravin Gordhan is referring to is keeping both the individual and the corporate tax rates in sync to make sure that individuals aren't incentivized to cross over to register as companies. But from the 1st of April, you'll be adding 40 cents a litre to the fuel price through both fuel levy as well as the road accident fund. It does bring into question the inflationary pressure that this is going to put on the economy. What was the rationale around that particular argument?
Well, you know, budgets are about balances, and balances are about looking at all sides of an equation. In this particular instance, from experience, it's been learned by the Treasury that if you leave these sorts of increases either too low or not make them at all and make the tough decisions, then they catch up with you, because the year after you will have to give a much bigger increase. And at the same time, the Road Accident Fund is in dire need of funds to meet its commitment in terms of the function it performs. And that's the balancing act it has pulled off, I suppose.
Now, the postponement of the mineral and petroleum royalties, those will certainly be going down very well at mining in Durban, not happening too far away from Parliament and Cape Town this year. But it is more about job preservation than bolstering the coffers of major corporates.
It's also a demonstration of sensitivity on the part of the Minister and the policymakers to the environment we find ourselves in, the kind of particular difficulties that an industry might be going through, the mining industry in particular in this instance, and a willingness to take bold decisions, notwithstanding the policy commitment that might have been made a year ago. And the only hope is that 1.8 billion rand benefit does result in a significant number of jobs not being lost and workers not being retrenched and the benefits being passed on to them.
You've also announced a final set of amendments around dividends tax as secondary tax on companies, or STC, falls away. What's changed? And talk us through your thinking on that level.
Well, it's been quite a big change, and it's been taking us, almost 3 years to actually do it. SDC was a system which ensured that the corporate entity paid what was essentially a dividend tax. This system that we're moving into is a more formal dividend tax, where technically it's the tax, rather the shareholder that actually pays the tax. But it's involved renegotiating about a dozen double taxation treaties with different countries in terms of how the tax sharing formulas will be involved. And that's almost completed, and it's scheduled at this stage for implementation sometime next year.
You've also been closing some of the loopholes, this time more clearance on motor vehicle allowances. What next might be on SARS's radar screen?
Well, our endeavor there is actually twofold. One is to ensure that we simplify the tax system, that we, as many other countries are doing around the world, to take off as many exemptions as you can, because that then makes tax submission easier, tax calculation easier, and the kind of service the tax administration can provide better than we might have been able to provide. On the other hand, there's abuse of exemptions as well. So the deemed formula allowed people who were basically sitting in the office for 8 hours to claim that their motor vehicles were being used for business purposes and to benefit from that. And that's produced, I think, the wrong kind of and perverse behavior, which we need to address. So there's two drivers, if you like, for that change.
Pravin Gordhan is the SARS Commissioner. He's going to be collecting a lot less tax in 2008, about 14 billion shy of the initial estimates. And in 2009, they're downward revising that number by 50 billion.